Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Ruddhamarudhastunnandu Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Panishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyindiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidussura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om Sudhi Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So we are continuing the discussion on the Gita Bhashyam. The Bhashya. Abhyudayartha Abhi Yat Pravati Lakshano Dharmo Varnasamancha Uddisya Vihitaha Sadevadisthana Prapti Hetu Apisan Ishwararpana Buddhya Anushtheyamanaha Sattasuddhaye Bhavati Phalabisanti Varjitaha Shuddha Sattvasya Cha Jnananistha Yogyata Prapti Dwarena Jnanotpatti Hetutvena Cha Nisrayasa Hetutvam Api Pratipadyate. So Bhashyagara gives a brief outline of the whole philosophy of human endeavor in spiritual life and also in secular life. All of us have to work. We have to work with our mind, with our intellect, with our emotions. No one can keep quiet physically and mentally at the same time. So Lord Krishna himself says in the 3rd chapter, Nahi kasyikshanamabi jatu tishtati akarma krita. We cannot keep quiet even for a split second, physically and mentally. Somehow our natural tendency is to act, to do something for our sustenance. But is it enough just to work hard with a lot of efficiency, with a lot of professionalism and attain a great success in material life? Bhashyakara is bringing out a unique paradigm of human endeavor, something that helps us to look beyond the cult of efficiency, beyond the paradigm of success and utilitarian success, something that transcends what we normally understand happiness in material life. Even if we work very hard, even if we succeed a lot, making a lot of money, wealth, having a good position, a good profession, still very often when we evolve to some higher level, every noble person will think, well, is there something beyond efficiency? Is there something beyond success? Am I just a being that takes birth one day in the past, lives maybe for 100 years if you are lucky, and coming to an end when the body is pushed through the tube? If life nothing but a journey, beginning with birth and ending with death as a piece of stone in the cemetery? Vedanta tells us that death is not the end of a journey, of our life journey. Death is not a full stop. Death is only a comma or a semicolon. So long as we do not realize our true nature, so long as we do not realize the fact that we are an immanent or pervading spiritual reality, so long as we do not realize our Atmanhood, the fact that we are Brahman, so long as we do not realize this truth, we have to continue moving through this rotating wheel of karma. It's called karma chakram. Birth, life, death and rebirth. In the process, people may succeed in material life. Some people do not succeed. So, grief and sorrow on the one hand, happiness and joy on the other. But so long as we do not realize our true nature, happiness at the empirical level, happiness that we feel when we achieve something at the material level, is only a temporary experience. It is in fact only the absence of unhappiness. Happiness at the empirical level is only the absence of unhappiness. What makes us happy may be lost tomorrow, then we become unhappy. So Lord Krishna says, we become truly happy only when we transcend the equation of happiness and unhappiness as these words are understood at a material level. For that, we must be able to detach ourselves from the result of what we are doing. We should do our best mentally and physically, but so long as we are bound to what we do and its result, then we experience anxiety at the time of doing work and depression and disappointment if the results are not up to the expectation, or we may become jubilant when the results are beyond expectation. But we do not always succeed. It's not possible for one to continue succeeding all the time. So we must look beyond success and failure. We should look beyond, we should think of some ideal, that some paradigm that transcends success and failure at the material level. That's why Lord Krishna says, Sukham Atyentikam Yeddat Buddhigrahim Atindriyam. So Atyentikam Sukham, the absolute happiness or joy, it's called blissfulness. It is not happiness as it is understood in its ordinary secular empirical sense. It is real, it's a kind of inner divine contentment that is never lost. That's called Atyentikam Sukham. That's beyond sensory perception. This Sukham we will be able to achieve only when we detach ourselves from our obsessive attachment to the results of whatever undertaking, whatever work we are doing. So that's the first stage in spiritual life, the practice of detached action. Action or duty, performance or responsibility without obsessive attachment to the results. That helps us to purify our mind, and gradually from action we evolve to the next stage, action with contemplation, action with detachment. It is called Nishkama Karma or Karma Nishtha. So from action with desire we evolve, we progress to the next stage, that is action without desire, action with total detachment towards the results of what we are doing. It doesn't mean negligence, indifference, or a never care attitude towards our duties and responsibilities. Lord Krishna will make this point clear. Saktaha karmani avidvamso yatha kurvanti bharata kurya vidwan tatha asaktaha chikishuhu lokasangraham. Those who work hard with a definite goal, with full attachment, they may show a lot of professionalism, lot of efficiency, a lot of success orientation. But in the process, they may also face a lot of problems that are inevitable for every action. Anxiety, neurosis, depression, disappointments if we do not succeed. And of course, sometimes we become overjoyed when we succeed. So, Lord Krishna says, yogi is one who, or yogi or vidwan is one who work hard with the same efficiency, with the same professionalism, with the same enthusiasm and zeal as an ordinary person who is attached. A yogi is one who has all this efficiency of an average person living this world who is working hard for success. So far as efficiency is concerned, a yogi is equally efficient. He has got the same enthusiasm and efficiency and zeal, but he is not attached. So Kuryan Vidwan Tatha Asaktaha. Vidwan, a yogi, a person who has learned the art of working hard, doing one's duty with full enthusiasm, but with a sense of total detachment. That person enjoys peace and happiness while doing work, and also he enjoys peace and happiness and tranquility even if he do not succeed, even if he doesn't succeed. Such people may not always succeed, but if he succeeds, he is happy, but his happiness is not like the happiness of a person who works with a lot of attachment. So the person who works with a lot of efficiency and professionalism but full attachment may run the risk of facing depression and disappointment if he does not succeed. On the other hand, a yogi who works with the same efficiency, with the same professionalism, with the same enthusiasm and zeal may succeed, and if he doesn't succeed, he won't be shattered. His failure will not have a devastating impact on his mind and life. So that's why Saktaha Karmanya Vidvamso Yatha Kurvanti Bharata. Person with full attachment, Saktaha. He works with a lot of efficiency, but then he's a slave of his attachment to the results of his actions. So, Kriya Vidwan Tatha Asakta. Vidwan, a yogi who knows the secret of Niskama Karma, he also works with the same degree of efficiency and professionalism, but he is not affected by the results of his actions. So, from action with desire to action without desire, without attachment. And then at the next stage, through this practice of constant Niskama Karma, our mind, our Chittam becomes pure. It's called Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi. When the Chittam attains purity, then what happens? We become fit for the highest spiritual realization. So, Niskama Karma, then Chitta Shuddhi, then Jnana Prapti and Moksha. This is the path according to Vedanta. First, we must give up all laziness and lethargy and do our duty. If we cannot do our duty without desire, then it's better to do our duty with desire than doing nothing, than running away from one's own obligations and responsibilities. It's always better to do our duty with full desire than running away from our duties and responsibilities. That's why Lord Krishna at the very beginning of the second chapter does not preach the highest level of karma yoga. He said, Bhaya, Renat, Uberadam, Mamsinte, Twa, Makaradha, Yesham Chattam, Bhumadu, Bhutwa, Yasisi Laghavam, Akirtim Chapi Budhani, Kathaishanditi, Aviyam, Sambhavidasi Chakirtihi, Maranat Adirichyati. If you run away from your duties and responsibilities, then what happens? Your enemies and also your friends will ridicule you. You become small in their eyes. So it's better to do one's duty with desire than running away from our duties and responsibilities. But there is a higher level. What is that higher level? To do our duties and responsibilities with all efficiency, without desire, without attachment. That's a higher level. And that will take us to the perfection of Niskama Karma. And once we are established in Niskama Karma, then Chitta Shuddhi is not far away. And Chitta Shuddhi will automatically make us fit for the highest Jnana Prapti and Moksha and Israyasa. This is what Shankaracharya is speaking about. In fact, he is presenting before us a unique paradigm of human life and human endeavor. All our natural tendencies to work emotionally, physically, intellectually, all these tendencies can be converted into Nishkama Karma that will help us to expedite, to fasten, to speed up our spiritual growth. So he says, Abhyudayartha api ye pravritti lakshano dharmo varnasramancha uddishya viktaha. So devadisthana prapti hetuhu. So all these ordinary secular duties and responsibilities which may help us to achieve abhyudaya, material prosperity. If we do that, if we do those duties and rituals properly, it may make us fit for some higher celestial achievement. We may be able to go to Swargaloka, Indraloka, Chandraloka, different celestial regions. So traditionally in our Mimamsa culture, people practice the Sapta Havir Yajna. They perform Agnihotra, Vajapeya, Ashwamedha, Somayaga, Adhiratra, Aptoyama. A number of Vedic rituals are performed. Used to be performed in those days when Shankaracharya wrote his commentary. Those karmas, those rituals were designed to take the doer, the ritualist, to some higher celestial regions, going to Swarga, enjoying the results of the punyas accumulated through this practice of these yajnas and yagas. Yajna can have a higher meaning, yajno vai sreshtatamam karma. That is the definition given by Vajrasaneyi Samhita. Yajna can be a kind of supreme manifestation of Nishkama Karma, but not always. Very often, Devadodeshena dravyasya tyagaha yajnaha. That Katyayana Vyakya, Sutra Vyakya says, Katyayana says, Devadodeshena dravyasya tyagaha. Normally, many of the rituals, according to Mimamsa philosophy, were performed for attaining some secular material prosperity. It could be long life, maybe it could be progeny, wealth, and so on. So there are such mantras out there, Jivema Sharadaschatam, Pashyema Sharadaschatam, and so on. Let me be blessed with long life, 100 years, 100 Sharad Kalas. Pashyema Sharadaschatam, Pabriyama Sharadaschatam. So these are all prayers which were uttered at the time of performing these rituals. These rituals may take us to some celestial regions, Swargaloka, Indraloka, Chandraloka, and so on, according to Mimamsa philosophy. But it is not a permanent situation. After some time, you have to come down to this earth and be born as a human being and go through this cycle of life, rituals, grief and enjoyment, suffering and enjoying, death and again rebirth. So this cycle continues. Shankaracharya says we must try to come out of this cycle. How do we do that? Sattva-shuddhe bhavati phalabhisandhi varjitaha. Ishwararpana buddhyanushthiyamanaha. The same rituals, if we perform as an offering to God, then what happens? It becomes a means, a path that takes us to Sattva-shuddhi or Chitta-shuddhi. And once we attain Chitta-shuddhi, then Jnana-prapti is not far away. And Jnana-prapti will automatically take us to moksha. So Bhashyakara says, we must do all our duties and responsibilities as an offering to God. If we can do whatever we do as an offering to God, then this God idea will automatically follow whatever we are doing. It is called yoga. The spiritual idea is linked to whatever we do. Every thought becomes a meditation. every act becomes an offering, and the whole world becomes an expression of the divine. Even the secular activities become spiritualized. It leads to spiritualization of our total life. Then what happens? That life in which all actions become an offering to God, all thoughts become a meditation, that life becomes completely spiritualized. Automatically that kind of nishkama karma anusthana will become jnanotpatti hetuku. How? Jnananishtha yogyata prapti dvarena. That kind of nishkama karma, where every action is performed as an offering to God. Ishwararpana buddhyanushthiyamanaka. Then what happens? It becomes jnananishtha yogyata prapti dvarena jnanotpatti hetuku. After attaining Chitta Shuddhi, it makes us fit for the highest highest realization, Jnanotpatti. And once Jnanotpatti we realize the truth that we are the Atman, then the Shreyasa, Moksha is inevitable. So every action, every physical action can become a spiritual endeavor. Physical energy that we normally use in our day-to-day life through all kinds of actions, whether a person is working in the university, in a factory, in the office, or a teacher or a student, whatever may be our profession, whatever may be the situation in which we find ourselves, we can spiritualize our life. The secular merges with the spiritual. Every physical action which requires physical energy becomes a spiritual endeavor. So physical energy is converted into spiritual energy. It's a unique paradigm of life that Shankaracharya puts before us. So he says, Jnananishtha yogyata prapti dvarena jnanopatti hetuvena cha nisreyasa hedutvam api pradipajyate. So this karma yoga eventually becomes a means for attaining the highest spiritual realization. Bhashyakara continues. तथा च इमं एव अर्थम अभिसंधाय वक्ष्यति ब्रह्मण्याथाय कर्माणि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति संगं त्यक्त्वा आत्मशुद्धये इति. Now, two very famous verses from the Gita are quoted here. The Bhashyakara tries to substantiate his argument. The argument that every action, physical action, mental action, intellectual action, emotional action, idea, concept, all this can become an offering to God. When we detach ourselves from kartrutva and bhoktrutva, then it becomes an offering to God. Ishwararpana buddhya as an offering to God. Then becomes karma yoga or nishkama karma, and that indirectly takes us to jnana prapti and moksha. So he quotes one verse from 5th chapter, 10th verse. Brahmanyathaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lippide nasa papena padmapatamiva ambhasa. So those who do all their actions, perform all their duties and obligations as an offering to God, without any personal attachment, without considering themselves as doers or enjoyers of their action, they are able to live in this world like a lotus leaf. A lotus leaf may be in the middle of a lake, but it never gets wet. It is found in the middle of a lake, but the water never makes it wet. Similarly, we may live in this world, but we can live in this world without becoming worldly minded. The world should not enter our mind. Like the water that does not touch the lotus leaf, the world should not be allowed to touch our mind. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, Swami Vivekananda's teacher, Guru Maharaj says, we must be able to live in this world, but world should not be within us. When you cross a river in a boat, the water should not be within the boat. The boat should be on the water level. If the water enters the boat will capsize, we may be even killed, we may be drowned. Similarly, when we live in this world, we must take care that we live in this world without being worldly minded. And it is possible. We can practice this non-attachment. How to practice non-attachment is difficult for ordinary people to do anything without a sense of purpose, without a focus, without some idea or plan or scheme behind. It is not humanly possible for us to do anything. So what we must do? The focus should be God. So every action, it may be physical action, intellectual action, mental action, it could be an idea, a feeling, or a physical endeavor, whatever may be. If we offer to God, then what happens? Our mind is detached from it. Then these actions will not enter our mind, will not dilute our mind, will not corrupt our mind. The water will not touch the lotus leaf. Similarly, the word will not touch our mind. So he says, Brahmanyathaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotyeha lipyade nasa papena patmapatramivamphasa. If we do everything as an offering to God, then we will be able to live in this world like a lotus leaf. We won't be affected by papas. Another verse is quoted, Yogina karma kurvandi sangam tektva atma shuddhaye kayena manasa buddhya kevalaihi indriyairapi yogina karma kurvandi sangam tektva atma shuddhaye. Yogis, karma yogis, spiritual seekers in general, they do everything, but they will be totally untouched by any kind of attachment. They do their duties and responsibilities through sharira, body, mind, intellect, indriyas, different senses of perception, senses of action. They make 24 hours active, 7 days of the week, 365 days of the year. The great spiritual teachers of the world, Shankara and Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, these are all grand examples. They live very short lives, but then they accomplish so much because they had so much of spiritual energy. Action do not necessarily make us tired. It's our attachment to what we do or our concern about the results of our actions that actually make us fatigued or anxious or worried or exhausted. But if every action is an offering to God, we don't get tired of doing worship. So that's the idea behind. The Bhashyakara continues, Imam dipragaram dharmam nisresa prayojanam paramartha tattvam cha vasudevakyam parabrahma abhideya bhudam visheshatah abhivenjayat visishta prayojana sabbandha abhideyavat Gita Shastram. Now, Bhashyakara is going to discuss what is called Anubandha Chadushtayam. The 4 Anubandhas, 4 important components of a Shastram, of a of a scientific work on spiritual life. Vishaya, Prayojana, Adhikari and Sambandha. Subject matter, necessity for his study, competency of the student, and connection of the subject matter with the book that we are discussing. These are called Anubandha Chadushtaya. Imam Dipragaram Dharmam Nisvesha Prayojanam Paramartha Tattvam Cha Vasudevakyam Parabrahma Abhideya Bhudam Visheshataha Abhivanjayat Visishta Prayojana Sambandha Abhideyavat Gita Shastra. So, this dharma, Dipragaram Dharma, that means Pravritti Dharma, Nivritti Dharma. Pravritti Dharma taught to Prajapatis and Nivritti Dharma taught to Sanagadeka. So, here Vasudeva is interpreted as Parabrahman. That's what Bhashyakara says. Vasudevakyam Parabrahma. So, the literal meaning is, Vasudevasya apatyam puman Vasudeva. This is a normal interpretation of Vasudeva. But the real meaning of Vasudeva is Sarvani Tatra Bhudani Vasanti Paramatmani Bhudeshu Chasa Sarvatma Vasudevastada Smritaka. This is the view of Vishnu Purana. Sarvani Tatra Bhudani Vasanti Paramatmani. That Paramatman in which all living beings reside. And that Paramatma is present in all beings, and all beings are present in Paramatman. Sarvani Bhudani Paramatmani Vasanti. All living beings are living in Paramatman, and Bhudeshu cha Sarvatma, and Paramatma, Sarvatma is living in all living beings. God is present in everything, and all are present in God. So, in that sense, the real dimension of Vasudeva is Paramatman or Brahman self. That's the view of Bhashyakara. Yataha tadarthe vijnade samasta purushartha siddhi ataha tad vivarane yatna kriyate maya. So this Gita Shastra has got this Vishaya, Prayojana, Adhikari, Sambandha. We already discussed this earlier. Because of its importance, its uniqueness, Bhashyakara says is going to begin a brief exposition of this great spiritual classic. Now, we have already completed the Upodhghata, or the preface to the first chapter. We are going to begin the second chapter, Upodhghata. So, this is the Upodhghata for the second chapter. And Upodhghata has got a special meaning. When the author doesn't directly enter the main topic, but instead of that, keeping the main topic or subject at the back of the mind, he introduces another subject which is related to the main subject, and then gradually enters the main subject. Such a process, such a work is called Upodhghata. Directly coming to the main topic is called Pratipatana. So, here again the Upodhghata continues. Atraja drishtva pandavanigam ityarabhya na yotsye iti govinda muktva tushnim babhuvaha ityedadantaha praninam Shokamohadi samsara bija bhuta doshodbhava karana pradasyanarthatvena vyakheyo grantha. The Bhashyakara here is referring to the whole text of Bhagavad Gita from the second verse of the first chapter to the 9th verse of the second chapter. Drishtva Pandavanigam Vyudham Duryodhanastada, that's the second verse sloka of the first chapter up to Nayosha iti govindam uktva tushnim babhuva. This is the 9th verse of the second chapter. So he has summarized the gist of the contents of these verses. That is the second verse, from the second verse of first chapter to 9th verse of the second chapter. He has condensed the whole gist, the essence of these verses in this single sentence. Itirandha praninam shoka mohadi samsara bija bhuda doshobhava karana prasanarthatena vyakhyayo grantha. He says, this grantha bhaga, I mean these verses, give a detailed description of the fact that shoka and moha are the real ultimate cause of samsara, and shoka and moha are caused by avidya or ignorance of our true nature. This is how it is to be interpreted. And the Giri gives a little more elaborate description of what is shoka and what is moha. Sa eva samsarasya dukkhatmano bijabhudo doshaha tasyodhava karanam tasyodhave karanam ahankaro mahakara tathedu avidya. So Anandagiri says, sa eva samsarasya dukkhatmano bijabhudo doshaha. So what is the dosha? This shoka, moha, etc. And the reason for this shoka and moha is ahankara and mamakara. I am the doer and this is my action, these things are mine, my wealth, my house and so on. And this kind of ahankara and mamakara. And he says, shoka and moha are two different feelings. Shoko manasastaho, moho viveka bhava. So what is shoka? Shoka is a kind of inner mental grief. And moha is actually much more dangerous. Moha is of course caused by shoka. They go together. Moha is complete absence of a discerning mind, complete absence of wisdom. So Arjuna was immersed in the ocean of shoka and moha. Shoka, moha, mahodadho nimagnaya Arjunaya. That's what Bhashyakara says elsewhere. So in the preface, the first chapter, Bhashyakara made a few points very clear. First, he explained the beginning or the origin of the universe, Narayana Paro Vyakta, Andama Vyakta Sambhavam, etc. In the Mangalacharana sloka, which is also Vishaya Nirdesha, the Bhashyakara explains the origin and evolution of the universe. And then he explains the Dvidha Dharma, the Pravritti Lakshana Dharma, Nivritti Lakshana Dharma, which constitute the essence of Vaidika Dharma. And then he explained how often this Vaidika Dharma gets degraded due to some people who are expected to practice Kam. So, Anushtatrinam Kamodbhava, that's the expression by Bhashyakara. So, Anushtata, if they are really practicing Vaidya Dharma, then they will not be victims of Kama. But they are supposed to be practitioners. They fail in their practice of Vaidya Dharma. So they become obsessed with desire, and then they go on indulging in different rituals, different actions and activities for fulfilling those desires. As a result of this, Dharma takes a back seat and Adharma begins to prosper. At that time, the Lord, out of his sympathy, compassion for humanity, takes birth as a human being, as an avatar. And this Gita was taught by such an incarnation who is a human aspect of the Lord. God himself takes a human form. He's half divine, half human. Apparently he was born as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, but in reality he is Parabrahman itself, and he gives a new interpretation to the Vaidya Dharma, and looking upon Arjuna as an instrument, he taught Arjuna the essence of this Vaidya Dharma. And through Arjuna, he was teaching the whole humanity. So these ideas were clearly explained in the at the very beginning of the preface to the first chapter. Tathahi Arjunena Rajya Guru Putra Mitra Suhrit Sujana Sambandhi Bandhaveshu Aham Esha Mama Ede Ittevam Bhrandi Pratya Nimitta Snega Vichedadi Nimitto Atmanaka Shokamoho Pradarsido Katham Bhishma Maham Sankhe Ityadina. So you have to remember, from chapter 1 up to chapter 2nd, 10th verse, that is from the very beginning of the first chapter till the 10th verse of the second chapter, there is a long description of samsara karanam, how we become part of this moving wheel, this cycle of samsara, that is birth, life, rebirth, and this cycle continues, and how this cycle is caused by shoka moha, and how this shoka and moha are caused by avidya. All these are explained in the verses from the beginning of the text up to the 10th verse of the second chapter. So Bhashyakara says, so Arjuna looked around the battlefield and he found in front of him Bhishma, Drona and other elders, his own cousins, those who were close relatives and friends with whom he was supposed to fight. So immediately he identified them as my people. So they may be fighting on the wrong side, but still Arjuna suddenly felt, well, I should not do my duty. Arjuna had come to the battlefield to do his duty as a soldier, and with whom he was supposed to fight, evil men like Duryodhana and Dushasana, who were the scourges of humanity, who had done so much of evil and adharma, and all others who were assembled were fighting on their side. So as a soldier who was fighting for dharma against adharma, for the protection of the good people, for the protection of the weak, and for the preservation of dharma, it was his duty to fight as a soldier. But suddenly he became weak, he became depressed, he wanted to withdraw from his duties and responsibilities. And the reason was, Agam Esha Mama Ete Itevam Bhrandi Pratya Nimitta Snega Vichedadi Nimittu Atmana Shoka Moho Pradarsidu Katham Bhishma Maham Sankhe Ityadi. Shoka Mohabhyam Hi Abhibhuta Viveka Vijnanaka Sota Eva Kshatra Dharme Yuddhe Pravurtaha Api Tasma Yuddhat Uparagama Paradharmam Cha Bhiksha Jivanadikam Kartum Pravavrde. Here we have to remember, Arjuna is a metaphor. Arjuna is a representative who represents a particular tendency of the human mind. When we find that a righteous duty and responsibility is a bit difficult, then we try to withdraw, we try to avoid doing our duty. Not because we do not want to enjoy the results of those painful actions, but we want to avoid going through the difficulty of doing that work. We are all attached to the result, and if possible, we will have all the results. If you could avoid the work and get only the result, we'll be happy. So Arjuna was here deluded by this wrong idea. Action, duty, performing one's own duties and responsibilities in difficult situations is quite unpleasant. So you can avoid the problems of action by running away from action. But we cannot do that. The reason is we cannot keep quiet mentally and physically even for one split second. If we don't try to do our righteous duty, then we may end up doing what actually is not our righteous duty. Because nahi kasikshanamabi jadu tishtati akarmakrita. Akarmakrita, without doing anything. Nahi kasikshanamabi. We cannot keep quiet mentally and physically and emotionally, even for one kshana. If we are not doing some good actions, we will be naturally be thinking of doing the opposite. Mind cannot keep quiet. Physically, we may be able to keep quiet for some time, but we have no control over our mind. We cannot really imagine what thought is going to emerge in our mind next moment. We can plan our physical actions more or less, but we cannot plan and determine what idea, what thought is going to emerge in our mind next moment. We cannot have a GPS system for the activities of the mind. So the only way to avoid doing the wrong thing is to constantly strive to do the right thing. Whether we succeed or not, we should always be engaged in doing the right thing. Even an effort to do the right thing will save us from a tendency to do the wrong thing. So that idea you find here in this Bhashya. Shoka mohabhyam hi abhibhuta viveka vijnanaka sota eva kshatra dharme yuddhe pravurtapi tasmat yuddhat upararama. Arjuna was completely immersed in shoka and moha. We already listened to Anandagiri's description. Shoko manasastavo moho viveka bhava. Shoka or grief is a problem of the mind, mental grief. But viveka bhava is still more dangerous. We lose our discerning faculty. So if grief and loss of our discerning faculty come together, it will be a big inner crisis, internal crisis. So that was what Arjuna was facing. So Arjuna tried to run away from his righteous duties and responsibilities. But then he cannot keep quiet. So what he did? So he wanted to engage in work which is actually not his. If we do not do what is our appointed righteous duty and responsibility, then we will be naturally drawn towards doing the opposite. That is what Arjuna was facing. Karmendriyani samyamya yaste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mithyachara sauchyate. The 3rd chapter, 6th verse, Lord Krishna says, those who try to pretend to be inactive by withdrawing their senses from their righteous actions, but sitting quiet somewhere dreaming, thinking about the results of actions that they would have enjoyed if they really did those things, if they really could do those actions. Such people are mithyachara, hypocrites. It is hypocrisy. The real yogi is one yastu indriyani manasa niyamya arabhati arjuna karmendriya karma yogam asaktah sabhisishyate. The real yogi is one yastu indriyani manasa niyamya arabhati arjuna. Mental, with the mind which is calm and quiet, they control their Indriyas from getting attached to different things. But at the same time, they do not remain inactive. They may be always active, but the mind is always in a state of perfect equilibrium because it is not attached to the action or its result. So a real yogi is one who mentally remains calm and quiet without any attachment. But physically, they may be engaged in doing their righteous duties and responsibilities. So if a person tries to run away from his righteous duties and responsibilities, his natural tendency to act will drag him into wrong actions, wrong thoughts and wrong ways of life. That danger is brought out here. Tathacha sarvapraninam shoka mohadi doshavishtajedasam subhavata eva sudharma parityagaha pradishiddha seva cha syad. Bhashyakara says, this is a natural tendency for people who are immersed in this ocean of shoka and moha, as Arjuna was, to renounce, to avoid their righteous duties and responsibilities, and then automatically they'll be indulging in actions which really are not their duties, not responsibilities. So even if they are engaged in their actions, still they will be fully attached to the results of their actions. So dharme pravurtanam api tesham vagmanakayadinam pravurtihi bhalavishandi vajjida eva sahankara bhavati. So those who are immersed in the ocean of shoka and moha will have a natural tendency to somehow avoid or run away from their rightful duties and responsibilities. Not only that, as a part of this phenomenon, they will also be drawn towards actions and activities which are harmful, which will take them away from their spiritual track. And even if they happen to be engaged in their duties, it will be always with a sense of pride. I am aham karta, aham bhokta. Bhalavishandi purvika eva sahankara bhavati. Most of the people who happen to be dragged into undesirable activities and tendencies are victims of this particular mental trap. Attraction for doing wrong things is always the result of indifference or negligence or unwillingness to do what is our real duty and responsibility. So the only path before us is to perform our Swadharma. If we cannot perform our Swadharma without attachment, well, at the beginning of our spiritual life, we have to shed our lethargy and laziness and start doing our work, Swadharma, with desire. At a later stage, we will be able to continue our duties and responsibilities without desire, without attachment, with total detachment. That's how we graduate to higher and higher levels of spiritual life. Tatra evam sadi dharma dharmopachaya ishtanishta janma sukha dukkha samprapti lakshanaha samsaraha anuparadaha bhavati ityadaha samsara bija bhudau shokamoho. Bhashyakara says, Tatra evam sati, that being the case, dharma dharmopachaya ishtanishta janma sukha dukkha samprapti lakshanaha samsaraha. This samsara, this cycle, these endless cycles of life, death and rebirth, these endless cycles of suffering and enjoyment, continuing one after the other. This wheel goes on rotating, this samsara. Anuparadaha bhavati. It doesn't stop anywhere. A wheel doesn't have an end or a beginning. It goes on rotating. So long as we go on doing our duties and responsibilities with great attachment, with great desire, with an obsessive attachment to the results of what we do, then we become overjoyed when the results are beyond expectations, and we become grief-stricken if the results are beneath expectations, or if we don't succeed at all. And we cannot always succeed. Everyone knows. We cannot keep succeeding all through. If there is success, there will be failure, and of course again success. You cannot have a coin with only one side. So also we cannot always succeed without the possibility of failure at some other point of time. So we should be able to look beyond success and failure. This higher perspective is the only way to attain peace of mind and mental equilibrium. And that is possible through non-attachment. And that's the first step in spiritual life. Non-attachment helps us to enjoy inner peace and happiness. And gradually our mind becomes pure, Chitta Shuddhi or Sattva Shuddhi. And Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi automatically, but certainly will take us the next step, Jnana Prapti. Because once we attain the peak of perfection in Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi, the Jnana Prapti is inevitable. And Jnana Prapti will automatically take us to moksha. Tayoscha sarva karma sannyasa purvagat atmajnanat na anyataka nivrittihi iti tad upadidikshuru sarva lokanugrahartham arjunam nimitti kritya aka bhagavan achochyan ityadi. So, this shoka and moha are the cause for the samsara, for the cyclic existence, this cycle of birth, life, rebirth, and so on. How this samsara comes to an end? This samsara comes to an end only by Atmajnana. But Atmajnana should be preceded by Sarva Karma Sannyasa. Sarva Karma Sannyasa should be understood as giving up of all desires, giving up of all attachment. Because physically we cannot remain inactive or mentally. So Sarva Karma Sannyasa means Sarva Karma Phala Sannyasa. Phala is also inevitable. So what does it mean? Our attachment to Sarva Karma Phala, our obsessive attachment to the results of our actions should be given up. And that process involves the practice of detachment or non-attachment. Detachment here means non-attachment. It is not a dry, life-negating ideal. Rather, it is a very refined, it is a very positive spiritual paradigm. This practice of dispassion or non-attachment. Patanjali calls it Vashikara Vairagyam and Guna Vaitrishnam. Two levels of renunciation or dispassion are described by Patanjali. But of course, Patanjali's yoga path is only a great help to attain Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi according to Advaita Siddhanta. So once we get fully established in Yama Niyama, and then if we practice Asana Pranayama Pratyahara, Dharana Dhyana and Samadhi, we reach the highest peak of Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi, and that will automatically make us fit for Jnana Prapti. So we will continue the discussion in the next class. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.